the mirrors of the Lord. But we all, with open face beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. We may see from this passage how the Apostle Paul received the Lord, and how he understands his life to be the light of men, and so their life also. Of all writers I know, Paul seems to me the most plainly, the most determinedly practical in his writing. What has been called his mysticism is at one time the exercise of a power of seeing, as by spiritual refraction, truths that had not, perhaps have not yet, risen above the human horizon. At another, the result of a wide-eyed habit of noting the analogies and correspondences between the concentric regions of creation. It is the working of a poetic imagination divinely alive, whose part is to foresee and welcome approaching truth, to discover the same principle in things that look unalike, to embody things discovered in forms and symbols heretofore unused, and so present to other minds the deeper truths to which those forms and symbols owe their being. I find in Paul's writing the same artistic fault, with the same resulting difficulty, that I find in Shakespeare's. A fault that, in each case, springs from the admirable fact that the man is much more than the artist, the fault of trying to say too much at once, of pouring out stintless the plethora of a soul swelling with life and its thought, through the too narrow neck of human utterance. Thence it comes that we are at times bewildered between two or more meanings, equally good in themselves, but perplexing as to the right deduction, as to the line of the thinker's reasoning. The uncertainty, however, lies always in the intellectual region, never in the practical. What Paul cares about is plain enough to the true heart, however far from plain to the man whose desire to understand goes ahead of his obedience, who starts with the notion that Paul's design was to teach a system, to explain, instead of help to see God. A God that can be revealed only to childlike insight, never to keenest intellect. The energy of the apostle, like that of his master, went forth to rouse men to seek the kingdom of God over them, his righteousness in them, to dismiss the lust of possession and passing pleasure, to look upon the glory of the God and Father, and turn to him from all that he hates, to recognize the brotherhood of men, and the hideousness of what is unfair, unloving, and self-exalting. His design was not to teach any plan of salvation other than obedience to the Lord of life. He knew nothing of the so-called Christian systems that change the glory of the perfect God into the likeness of the low intellects and dull consciences of men, a worse corruption than the representing of him in human shape. What kind of soul is it that would not choose the Apollo of light, the high-walking Hyperion, to the notion of the dull, self-cherishing monarch, the law-dispensing magistrate, or the cruel martinet, generated in the pagan arrogance of Rome, and accepted by the world in the church as the portrait of its God? Jesus Christ is the only likeness of the living Father. Let us see then what Paul teaches us in this passage about the life which is the light of men. It is his form of bringing to bear upon men the truth announced by John. When Moses came out from speaking with God, his face was radiant. Its shining was a wonder to the people and a power upon them. But the radiance began at once to diminish and die away, as was natural, for it was not indigenous in Moses. Therefore Moses put a veil upon his face, that they might not see it fade. As to whether this was right or wise, opinion may differ. It is not my business to discuss the question. When he went again into the tabernacle, he took off his veil, talked with God with open face, and again put on the veil when he came out. Paul says that the veil which obscured the face of Moses lies now upon the hearts of the Jews, so that they cannot understand him. but that when they turn to God, go into the tabernacle with Moses, the veil shall be taken away, and they shall see God. Then they will understand that the glory is indeed faded upon the face of Moses, but by reason of the glory that excelleth, the glory of Jesus that overshines it. Here, after all, I can hardly help asking, would not Moses have done better to let them see that the glory of their leader was altogether dependent on the glory within the veil, whither they were not worthy to enter? Did that veil hide Moses' face only? Did he not, however unintentionally, lay it on their hearts? Did it not cling there, and help to hide God from them, so that they could not perceive that the greater than Moses was come, and stormed at the idea that the glory of their prophet must yield? Might not the absence of that veil from his face have left them a little more able to realize that his glory was a glory that must pass? A glory whose glory was that it prepared the way for a glory that must extinguish it. Moses had put the veil forever from his face, but they clutched it to their hearts, and it blinded them. Admirable symbol of the wilful blindness of old Mosaist or modern Wesleyan, admitting no light that his Moses or his Wesley did not see, and thus losing what of the light he saw and reflected. Paul says that the sight of the Lord will take that veil from their hearts. His light will burn it away. His presence gives liberty. Where he is, there is no more heaviness, no more bondage, no more wilderness or Mount Sinai. The Son makes free with sonship. And now comes the passage whose import I desire to make more clear. But we all, having this presence and this liberty, with open face beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image, that of the Lord, from glory to glory, even as of the Lord the Spirit. We need no Moses, no earthly mediator to come between us and the light, and bring out for us a little of the glory. We go into the presence of the Son revealing the Father, into the presence of the light of men. Our mediator is the Lord himself, the Spirit of light, a mediator not sent by us to God to bring back his will, but come from God to bring us himself. We enter, like Moses, into the presence of the visible, radiant God. Only how much more visible, more radiant! As Moses stood with uncovered face, receiving the glory of God full upon it, so with open, with uncovered face, full in the light of the glory of God, in the place of his presence, stand we, you and I, Corinthians. It is no reflected light we see, but the glory of God shining in, shining out of, shining in and from the face of Christ, the glory of the Father, one with the Son. Israel saw but the fading reflection of the glory of God on the face of Moses. We see the glory itself in the face of Jesus. But in what follows, it seems to me that the Revised Version misses the meaning almost as much as the Authorized, when, instead of beholding as in a glass, it gives reflecting as a mirror. The former is wrong. The latter is far from right. The idea with the figure is that of a poet, not a man of science. The poet deals with the outer show of things, which outer show is infinitely deeper in its relation to truth, as well as more practically useful, than the analysis of the man of science. Paul never thought of the mirror as reflecting, as throwing back the rays of light from its surface. He thought of it as receiving, taking into itself the things presented to it, here, as filling its bosom with the glory it looks upon. When I see the face of my friend in a mirror, the mirror seems to hold it in itself, to surround the visage with its liquid embrace. The countenance is there, down there in the depth of the mirror. True, it shines radiant out of it, But it is not the shining out of it that Paul has in his thought. It is the fact, the visual fact, which, according to Wordsworth, the poet always seizes, of the mirror holding in it the face. That this is the way poet or prophet, Paul was both, would think of the thing, especially in the age of the apostle, I shall be able to make appear even more probable by directing your notice to the following passage from Dante, whose time, though so much farther from that of the apostle than our time from Dante's, was in many respects much liker Paul's than ours.